welcome folks from coast to coast, as I understand. This is an important topic. It confronts us daily, I think, in our adult lives in many cases and in young children's lives. So this is the 12th in a series of webinars that I've done over the last 16 months on the SSIS. It's a new topic for me in some ways, folks. I've been around doing social skills work, as you can see with this slide, really since the mid-1980s and the development of various measures, the social skills rating scale, social skills improvement system, and most recently the social emotional learning edition of the social skills system. So we're going to dig in today into the concept of bullying and look at intervention units that have come out of the SSIS, what we call SIP, the Class-Wide Intervention Program. The SIP has been acknowledged recently and evaluated by folks out of CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning, as a select program, which means that it has evidence to support its efficacy. I do want to differentiate, though, that the program's efficacy is largely based on in all students, not just a subset of bullies. I'm going to talk more about that. And before I go too far here, just in terms of this work, I want to highlight that if you find this work interesting, the SSIS SEL materials of value to you, you or a colleague may want to attend the forthcoming November 6th webinar dealing with really planning and leading a very time-efficient universal SEL program. So let's move forward. As part of the invitation to join this, you all should have received at least two briefs. That's what we're calling them, Intervention Simplified briefs. And those briefs dealt with teaching children how to get along with others and teaching children to do nice things to others. These are actually two of the four behaviors that we're going to talk about today and dig into details of literally how to teach these behaviors. If you find these of use, I'm pretty confident that you can go to the Pearson website, and there'll be a link here. You've already got it through your connections with this invitation to this webinar today. But there are additional units, all of which I'm going to talk about today, as well as documents about evaluating programs and multi-tiered systems and how to use the SSIS SEL materials in those systems. But that's the warm-up, folks. So now, what are we going to do today? Well, in an ideal world, I'd be sitting in front of you face-to-face and have much more interaction. But trust me, there are opportunities to interact. There's a couple pauses in this session today where we'll take your questions, at least a few of them, and at any time you can log those questions. We're going to try to cover 7 things, a bit ambitious, mind you, in our hour and 15 minutes together. I'll talk about resources, specific resources that I think help simplify intervention. That's the end story about bullying, isn't it? Trying to change behavior, trying to create a classroom context and climate where kids can deal with bullying, as well as reducing specific behaviors of a bully. We're going to define this, though, very quickly. We maybe run the risk of all using the word bullying and meaning some different things, but I'll define that for you quickly. I'm going to talk about how we identify bullies. So there's an assessment part to this intervention story. We will identify very specific behaviors that ultimately, there's a key word that we want to replace. So we're going to take the approach here today that once we've identified a bully, we need to figure out the behaviors that he or she exhibits, and we want to replace those behaviors. We want to give that child the ability to accomplish some of his or her same goals, getting attention, being involved with other people, having influence on a group, but we want to give them a socially appropriate way to get that attention. And concurrently, we want other children to have these behaviors in their repertoire to actually minimize the effects of bullying. So we're going to talk about the class-wide intervention program. And in effect, I pulled out of that program 8 behaviors, 4 of which we'll focus on today, that would form, I guess, what I call an SEL anti-bullying module. Okay? And then ultimately I'll summarize that. At the bottom of this page, you can see the link where you can get all of the information. This session's being recorded, as Sherry told you. You can download it, share it with other people, review it. But the point is, sit back, think, but relax, and let's venture into dealing with anti-bullying behaviors. The first thing I'm going to do today, though, is going to ground this in terms of some tools. These are tools you can use. I'm mindful that there are other assessment instruments out there that you may be using already to identify bullies. But if you don't have other instruments, or if you want a good assessment that's aligned to intervention, that's aligned to specific intervention units, I'm going to suggest you use our original SSIS assessment. This is the teacher version. There's a parent version, a student version. This is different from the SEL version of this instrument in that it has the ability, we left in the original version, the ability to focus on problem behaviors, okay? You'll see that there's a subset of behaviors here. Embedded in that, there are a family of bullying behaviors as well as externalizing and internalizing problem behaviors. But when you get the results of this assessment, that can connect you then to an intervention program. And I'm showing you the intervention manual. And you'll learn, if you haven't attended some of these previous sessions about the SSIS SEL, you learn that, yes, there's a hard copy manual, but all of the intervention materials are then online that you connect to, downloadable. And it's this set of resources that we're going to look at today closely, and how teachers or psychologists or other interventionists in your school can utilize these resources to directly teach desired behaviors that can replace problem behaviors as part of the bullying repertoire. Okay? That's our goal. So I've used the word bullying probably 10 or 12 times already. And so before I say it again, let's look at a consensus definition that has grown out of the research. A widely accepted research definition of bullying describes it as a subcategory of aggression or of aggressive behaviors characterized by 3 elements: hostile intentions, power imbalance, and behavior, a behavior that's repeated over time. Okay? So these 3 characteristics are what researchers are using, what many of the assessment tools have used to help you identify individuals who possess these behaviors. I admit, though, and it seems to be pretty clear, that the hostile intention is the element that gets most of the influence in terms of identifying bullying. Power imbalance and behavior that's repeated over time are part of the definition, obviously. So, bullying involves, some people would use the words intimidation, threatening. They're basically unreasonable behaviors and statements with the intention of harming another person or other group of people. In effect, you can say, well, why do this, though? The consequences of these actions for bullying are feelings of dominance or feelings of control over others, influence over others in a forceful way, and also gaining attention. Now, many of us sitting in this audience today would think of other ways to gain attention, okay? Sometimes the attention a bully gets is positive from other kids who admire him or her, or sometimes it's negative from other kids or other adults. Regardless, these are the characteristics of bullying, and as I've listed here, many resources that I've used to come to this conclusion. Okay? These resources are also at the end of this whole slideshow, so if you want to dig into these and gain more knowledge yourself, you're welcome to do that. A couple research notes are important here, that between 10 and 30% of children and youth experience and are involved in bullying. Okay? 30% is a big number. My recent research suggests it might be closer to 10%. But regardless, it really speaks to that there's a significant number of students, probably some in every school, maybe one in every grade level or two or three, that might exhibit the types of behaviors that we've defined here. It's also important to note that it's not an isolated problem to a particular culture, and it is identified worldwide. In fact, if you look here at the references, OLVAS, that's O-L-W-E-U-S, is Norwegian. And although Dan Olvas did much of his original work in the United States, Scandinavian countries have largely been part of his study purview. And a large amount of the research that we're reading here in the United States is actually conducted in Europe. So the point is, it's a pervasive concern. Children between the ages of 3 and 18 and older exhibit some of these behaviors. So we need to think about ways of understanding it and, most importantly, addressing it. So let's think here for a few minutes. In our experiences, I suspect we've all observed some physical bullying, some what you characterize as relational bullying, more verbal-oriented behaviors, and frankly, relational-oriented bullying, particularly cyber-relational bullying, is more likely in the repertoire of young females than physical bullying, although we see all three types of bullying. We see it in homes, we see it in schools. So context is important. It speaks today, really, I'm going to kind of feature the school side of this because we're privileging data from teachers. But there are assessments. In fact, many of you are well aware that some of the most frequently used assessment tools are really self-assessments. I'm going to say a little bit more about that as we go forward, but there are parent assessments. My research suggests that parents, teachers, and students do see things a little differently. No big surprise. There's not a super strong agreement between assessments done by parents, teachers, and students. Interestingly enough, students' assessments tend to estimate a higher level of bullying behavior, student self-assessment, that is. Now, these repeated acts of aggressive behavior typically occur against individuals and or groups, okay? And they result in a variety of harmful acts, physical, mental, and or emotional. Okay? Hard to see some of these, but they're registered by many people. There are two types of bullies based on socialization that we often see. The sort of the traditional stereotypical one is what we call the socially marginalized student. The student that's on the periphery and might be socially awkward a bit and more likely to express physical aggression. But every bit, and maybe even more prevalent today, are what we're seeing as socially connected bullies, okay, through social media in particular. These tend to be proactive, goal-oriented acts of aggression and using their established social status to control others in many cases. So they're more likely to employ bullying periodically and use social media as a supplement or as the main way to exhibit bullying behavior. Getting a little bit more concrete and a little more specific to today's focus, examples of bullying. I'm sure we all could add to this list, but bullying involves a family of problem behaviors that are aggressive and very assertive by nature. So here are some examples. A student does things to make others feel scared, is aggressive towards people or objects, forces others to act against their will. That's sort of classic bullying, forces others to act against their will. Says nasty things about a person to make them feel bad. Keeps others from joining groups, okay, from joining a group. Classic relational aggression. Okay, so I'm sure we can, each one of you could add an example or two to this list, and that list would become very long. These are all problem behaviors, and we all want to diminish them, to reduce them or eliminate them. But that's difficult. It really is, and it means that we have to use punitive methods in most cases. So I've taken the tactic of asking you here, and I will follow this path throughout the rest of the session. The question becomes this: what are some of the incompatible desired behaviors to these behaviors? What are some incompatible desired behaviors? Because when we can think of incompatible desired behaviors, that allows us to use positive, direct, reinforcing-oriented treatment methods. Okay, schools embrace these. Okay, these are tactics that teachers, psychologists, counselors can use to reduce problem behaviors. In effect, it takes us into the arena of really what we call replacement behaviors. Okay? So before going into that arena, I want to give you a caution. Okay, why am I cautioning this right here? Well, the first point I want to make is to date there's unfortunately, very little published research that documents highly effective school-based interventions for significantly changing established bullying behaviors. Okay? There are a lot of people out there putting forth effort. I applaud their efforts. There are different materials, different orientations. But at the end of the day, if you look at the meta-analysis research, work by Merrill and others most recently, we're not seeing very many programs that can tout that they're highly effective. What we are seeing are, in many schools, these universal prevention-type programs are being implemented, along with specific school policy changes and rules about bullying behaviors. This is having a positive effect. Some of these school-wide efforts are changing people, but largely it's the people around the bully that they're changing. It's creating an environment that's less tolerant of bullying and teaching people how to minimize the impact of bullying. So these are good. These are good things. That's not the program that I'm advancing today, but these are important things. Third, the approach that I am taking in this session is the application of several skill-focused intervention units that come out of this SSIS SEL SIP program, Class-Wide Intervention Program. The intervention units, in effect, form what I call a bullying replacement module, or an anti-bullying module, if you will. This module, though, it's very important. It's part of highly effective and evidence-based programs. As I indicated, the overall SEL SIP has been recognized by entities like CASEL as being effective. But the subset, and with the targeting use of these units towards bullying, they have not yet been proven effective. So I want to start there by being truthful, transparent with you. That doesn't stop me, because I'm seeing the need because of the paucity of effective methods, and I know that the methods that I'm going to advance to you can be used by teachers effectively, can be used by psychologists effectively. Let me prompt you, though. Hopefully this engages you. What behaviors would likely be in a bullying prevention or reduction module if you were creating it? Just think for a minute. What behaviors do you want to see in kids' repertoires? What are the key replacement behaviors that you want to teach bullies? And you consequently also teach other kids around the bullies, because these are going to be desired behaviors. So while you think about that, let me add a little to the mix here. So when I thought about that, this is where I went. Okay, I went to the set of SEL competencies that CASEL has advanced. I really like these. These are very desirable behaviors, pro-social behaviors: social self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. These are all behaviors that are part of this competency framework that CASEL has put forth. I give you the the site and the reference to this overall SEL competency framework that CASEL has. And many of you have seen this little wheel, if you will, that looks at the integration of 5 areas of social emotional learning that are highly important. Today, as we go through this, we're going to actually pull behaviors that represent self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. I believe there's 8 overall behaviors that we need to focus on. Today, given time constraints, we're going to focus on 4 behaviors, 1 from self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Okay? So there's a theoretical context for this work. There's an empirical context for this work. But before we get into the intervention, of course, we're always have this issue of identifying children. Who are the children in greatest needs? Who are exhibiting high rates of bullying behaviors? Note, I'm not calling these kids bullies per se, but they're exhibiting bullying behaviors. And that's what we want to focus on. We don't need to label kids too much. We need to understand the behaviors that we want to affect and influence. So to do this, some of you I know are out there using Olaf's bullying questionnaire. Some of you are using Reynolds' bullying victimization scales published by Pearson. Some of you are using the old tried and true child behavior checklist that Achenbach and colleagues developed. These are all useful tools. These are all in the research literature. I will say this, that they are longer assessments than what I'm going to propose. And I will note, too, on this slide, there's upwards of 41 different research instruments out there, some of which have been published and accessible by educators. So there's a lot of assessment tools out there. There's virtually no other assessment tool, however, that looks at bullying from 3 perspectives. That is the parent, the teacher, and the student. And also contextualizes bullying behaviors in a much larger family of desired social skills or social emotional behaviors. Okay? That instrument's the SSIS. I'm the author or the co-author of that with Frank Gresham. I'm highlighting here a couple things. I want to minimize confusion and maximize efficiency. So in 2008, we published the social skills, the SSIS rating scales. Okay? And that is a comprehensive look at desired behaviors, problem behaviors, and academic competencies. In 2017, also with Pearson, Frank Gresham and I developed off of the original rating scale in 2008 a new version that we call the social emotional learning rating forms. There's a teacher, there's a parent, there's a student form of this. It uses the same desired social behaviors in the 217 form, but does not include the problem behaviors. Why did we do that? Well, we did that because we wanted to create a very focused, streamlined measure for use in universal SEL programs. But when you start dealing with bullies, you've got to have a measure that also takes into consideration some of the related problem behaviors. So you can use the older version, the 208 version, to more comprehensively assess problem behaviors. And that's what I've used today. That's what I'm using in my research and other people are using in research to understand social problem behaviors of bullies. And then you'll see that as we do that, we can also take advantage of the updated SEL version's intervention components. Okay? So bear with me. I'm going to illustrate the use of these assessment tools, this family of SEL assessment tools, in a multi-tiered system. Okay? You're all quite familiar, I suspect, if you work in schools, almost regardless of what state you're in, you're talking about levels of support services for children, Tier 1 levels, Tier 2, Tier 3. When we talk about students that we've identified with bullying, many cases, these are kids that are tough kids in some ways, tough behaviors to eradicate or reduce. And so we're really focusing on Tier 2 and Tier 3 at some point with kids who don't respond to Tier 1 or Tier 2 behaviors. This visual here, now that I've got all of the screen populated in the way I want to, highlights that in an ideal system, we would screen using the SSIS SEL screening tool. We would intervene then. Kids that don't respond get additional focus, probably using more detailed rating form of the SEL, and then in more intervention, and then children who then still don't respond, here in the blue box, need more in-depth analysis. It's that in-depth analysis is where we start spending more time, fewer kids, but more time looking at their problem behavior ratings, okay? And those problem behavior ratings help us identify them as a potential bullying. So in the problem behavior scale, on the SSIS, there's a subscale that we've called the bullying subscale. These are the items. There's only 5 items, not 40 items, not 35 items like some of the other scales have. We only need 5 items to do this well. Item number 49 is bullies others. Item number 52 is does things to make others feel scared. 55 forces others to act against their will. 58 keeps others out of social circles. And 61 is aggressive towards people or other or objects. What I've done here is noted that these items are scored on a frequency dimension from 0, never, to almost always a 3. And I've taken a clip out of the technical manual that basically says, on average, teachers see that kids ages 3 to 5 exhibit sometimes 3 or 4 of these behaviors. On average, teachers see students ages 5 to 12 exhibiting 3 or 4 of these behaviors. Both males and females exhibit some of these behaviors. Sometimes they force others against will. Sometimes they don't. That's average, okay? So what's my point of showing you this? My point is a couple things, is that we have a formalized, systematic way to identify and evaluate through the eyes of teachers, parents, or students the exhibition of classic bullying items. The point being is that students who would exhibit these a full standard deviation above, so getting ratings of 7 or 8, or getting ratings of 10 or 11, 2 standard deviations above, those children are probably your bullies, okay? So we've done that. We've studied them with hundreds of cases, and here's what we learned, okay? We learned this is a database here that I want to show you, and it's really the last data-oriented slide that I'm going to perseverate on a little bit, okay? What we've learned is the following. Children who exhibit high rates of bullying behavior, like I just showed you in the last slide, they exhibit low levels of empathy behaviors and actually fairly high levels of assertion behaviors. So think about that for a minute. Think about children in your classrooms or children in your schools that you know often exhibit some bullying behaviors. Now think about them. Do they show empathy? Are they highly assertive? Well, that's what we found with hundreds of cases of kids. The takeaway from this is that externalizing behaviors of bullies are strongly associated with their bullying behaviors. Empathy behaviors are negatively associated, meaning very few negative. And assertion behaviors, largely with adolescents, are actually at fairly moderate to high levels. Our data also, like that early slide I showed you where I reported rates that Cook and others found, we find about 10% of kids show this profile, if you will. 10% of bullies show high externalizing, low empathy, and as you get older, as you get towards adolescence, the secondary group, fairly high levels of assertion behaviors. Now that's meaningful to me. That gives me a link to interventions that I can use. I'm going to pursue interventions then that increase empathetic behaviors, that decrease to some degrees or temper assertion behaviors to make them more socially acceptable. If we can do that, we can potentially minimize the problems that bullies have, and consequently, they're likely to fit better in their classrooms, in their social circles, in their schools and communities. Okay? So, let me move forward here. This is the list. Back to the list. These are the problem behaviors exhibited by children who often bully others. That's pretty well indisputable. Okay? Now, on the right-hand side, this is where we're going from a treatment perspective. These are desired behaviors by definition that are incompatible. What are they? Does nice things for others, makes others feel better, stays calm with others, respects other people's things, gets along with others, shows concern for others, asks others to do nice things. So if we can teach these 8 behaviors, if you can teach these 8 behaviors, you're on a path to reducing the difficulties that bullies often exhibit in their own behavior repertoire. And if you teach these to whole classes using a universal level 1 approach to support services, you're also creating and increasing these behaviors in kids that surround bullies. And in doing that, you minimize victims and you maximize the likelihood of reducing bullying behaviors. Okay? So let's talk about these as replacement behaviors just a little bit more. Okay? I already introduced you to the 5 tassel areas, and what I'm proposing is that we cut across those areas. At least today, I'm going to emphasize 4 areas that we cut across: self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. In doing so, we come up with then a replacement behavior. And a replacement behavior is what you want to do to replace some unwanted behavior. Focusing on problems may just reinforce that behavior. So we really want to focus on desired behaviors. The CASEL framework, which we use to build the SSIS SEL assessment, the SSIS SEL intervention program, are pretty popular in many schools. So I use that framework today to advance our thinking about an anti-bullying, a program that you might label as a way to prevent or definitely reduce bullying behaviors. Okay? So students are social beings. Of course they are. Most of what they do is greatly influenced by their social surroundings, and specifically the groups that they refer to as their peer group. So many of the behaviors that students engage in are guided by their perceptions of how their peers will respond to them. Right? So we want to create a culture. We want to create a climate in the classroom where the students get used to responding to desired behaviors and feeling positive as opposed to responding to negative behaviors. So we're not only teaching those who have high levels of bullying behaviors better ways to respond, we're teaching their peer group ways to respond. Okay? So we really do care about students who bully, and we want to change their behaviors. Okay? But we also care about victims of bullies. And victims often lack appropriate social skills and social problem-solving capabilities as well. So we really do want to think about some of the victims, some of the children who may be identified with a disability, or some of the children who may have autistic-like spectrum disorders. They're typical victims of bullies. Okay? So we want to help them to minimize a response that reinforces the bully. So this gets a little complicated, actually. So we're not just pulling bullies out. We're really thinking about bullies. They're centrally focused here, but we also want to deal with those around bullies. And there are actually student bystanders that often reinforce bullying behaviors by their reactions. So that's why it's a tricky area. That's why many of you are listening today, because you haven't yet solved it. and understand that we can't just have this little small intervention group of bullies. When we intervene for bullies, we actually intervene with large groups of kids that often have their reactions are important because they reinforce kids. So this is the program now. We're shifting from identifying and sort of appreciating the attributes of a bully and his or her social network to thinking about intervening, okay? So we're going to use the SIP program, the class-wide intervention program, as our intervention resource. So in the SIP program, there are 23 behaviors. I'm not going to read them to you today. You can see them, okay? And for the full program, we call the first 10 behaviors the 10 core skills. And all of the behaviors that I'm going to feature today, each of the 4 behaviors I feature today, that would be Unit 7, gets along with others. Unit 8, stays calm with others. Unit 9, do the right thing. And Unit 10, do nice things for others. They're obviously part of the core skills. So it's a bully prevention program that's embedded in what we would call core fundamental skills for intervention. And here they are highlighted. I've pulled them out, and we're going to work through stay calm with others, do nice things for others, gets along with others, and do the right thing. Okay. Obviously, those are the labels for the units, but we're going to get very detailed about these. So overall, though, if time allowed, we could go through all 8 skills that frequently need to be dealt with as replacement behaviors for bullies. I have some confidence that what I'm going to put forth today is going to have some effects. Okay. In fact, there's a series of research studies done by people independent of me that show when you implement the core curriculum, those 10 behaviors, which embed the 4 that I'm going to feature today, you get what's called the triple positive impact, and we call it the triple positive theory of impact. That is, effective SEL interventions with the behaviors that we're featuring today increase the frequency of SEL skills, okay? Decrease, this is where the replacement notion comes in, decreases the frequency of many problem behaviors, like those that are part of an aggressive profile of bullies. And when you do that effectively, over time you see this influence on key academic behaviors. In fact, in elementary schools, we have a fair amount of data to show that by teaching desired social behaviors, we actually can increase reading and increase math. So I show you this little image here to remember triple positive impact. That's what we're trying to achieve. Now let me pause a minute here before I get into the very specifics of teaching these anti-bullying behaviors and ask Chris, are there questions I need to address, Chris, from the group today? Anything in particular?
Yes, Steve, they have been. Yeah, I've addressed the question.
You've addressed them successfully, you think? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to count on my man Chris, folks. But let me just say this. You'll get my email address at the end as well as at the beginning of this webinar. If there are additional questions or if you challenge Chris or some other idea you have, please feel free to write me. In fact, I'm going to be around most of the rest of the day, and I'll respond today. To your questions if you have them. Okay? Let's venture forward now. We've got about 35 minutes to go. We've got 4 skills to teach, and all of the skills are going to be taught within a very typical, common, powerful framework. Here's that framework. Just look at this for a minute, folks. Every skill we teach, we're going to go through 6 instructional phases: tell, show, do, practice, monitor progress, and generalize. These skills that we teach, and to get the appropriate dosage, we want to teach, we have 3 lessons. So each skill, okay, gets along with others is a skill unit. We're going to teach it 3 times, and usually the lesson lasts about a half an hour. Now, you may find with your students, particularly kids who have pretty strong repertoires of bullying behavior, you may actually need to increase the dosage and teach these units 4 times or 5 times for them to grasp the behavior, to have the experience of using the new behavior. So let me venture forward. Each of these skills, each of these instructional phases, tell, show, do, practice, monitor progress, and generalize, is more deeply defined in the intervention manual. Okay? You can see coaching and modeling are really what we mean as teaching and show. And then getting students to role play and rehearse our do and practice phase sort of central elements. We want all kids to monitor their progress. This is actually a big self-awareness component. If you harken back to the CASTLE framework, we in fact build self-awareness into every unit. Okay? And then we want to think about generalization. And this often gets short shrift. Why? They run out of time. They actually find that it's difficult to get kids to think about applying the skill they're teaching to new and different situations. However, this is critical. Generalization is a critical aspect for preventing bullying, because bullying actually occurs places outside of the classroom, places outside of the intervention setting where you're at. So you really got to prepare kids for how they're going to respond to a bully, or how they're going to, if they have bully-like behaviors, going to try to get things they want and need appropriately. Generalization is a big deal. Okay? I'll talk more about it as we go forward. So here are the intervention elements. Every unit that we're going to teach, each of these 4, this happens to be the samples from Gets Along with Others. These are the materials you use that kids engage with you on to learn these new behaviors. Every unit has a set of PowerPoints. So as an interventionist, you're going to use this manualized-based treatment, but all of them are scripted for you. Yes, you could read from the manual, but they're scripted for you on PowerPoints. You, as the interventionist, will look at the dark section here under the tell, that green band. Students are expected to be focusing on the right side. On the other hand, if the students can read what you have, that's all fine. That's all fine. In addition, we have skill step cue cards. So we break down a skill. It Gets Along with Others gets broken into 4 steps. There's a think step, there's a talk step, there's a do step, there's a smile step. And these get elaborated even further. But these are note cards, if you will, cue cards. There's emotion cue cards. We ask kids to think about what emotions are you feeling, what emotions you think the people you're interacting with are feeling. This is a hugely important part of empathy, understanding how other people feel, okay? Understanding how you feel. Okay? We're going to teach those elements in this program. We have what we call a student engagement record. We like kids to make some notes. We like kids to record. We like kids to monitor progress. So what you see is this record, this student engagement record, actually cuts across the skill steps cue card, the emotional cue cards, the progress monitoring, and actually the last part of it is dealing with generalization. We have videos, okay? We use these videos to prompt kids to see situations that other students like them are likely to be in, and where the behavior of, in this case, Get Along with Others, can be used. We have videos that model positive use of Get Along with behaviors and negative use. I don't want to suggest that we have a whole bunch of videos on kids getting bullied. We do not, okay? We have some situations where kids are interacting negatively with others, calling a person a name, pushing, exhibiting some of the features of bullying, but not the repeated multi-situational bullying activities. So there currently are not videos on that. There are very important role play sessions. This is the area, the role play cue card, and I'm exhibiting just one little part of a cue card down here in the lower right-hand corner, where you can modify, where you can make adjustments to this curriculum and expand it, okay, so that it meets your needs about specific situations that you have seen students be confronted with, that bullies actually exhibit behaviors. Okay? So here's the first unit. I'm going to go through 4 of these units. This first one I'm going to go a little slower than the next 3. So I want you to see the pieces of the intervention lesson up front and close, okay? So we're going to talk about getting along with others, and this is a relationship skill. So here's the first thing you get. You got a manual. If you buy the manual, then you get access to all of the online materials, okay? The online materials, the resources, when you go to the mini website for the SSIS SEL resources, one thing you see is the unit, getting along with others, and you'll see that there's digital lessons, cue cards, role play cards, video that's a positive example, a video that's a negative example. In addition to this very specific unit-oriented resources, there are additional resources. The student engagement record, the emotions cue card, it's a standard card. And then for those of you who are interested in making sure that the intervention gets implemented well, with integrity, if you will, we have a tool that we ask the interventionist to complete about the integrity and his or her perceived how well it's going, the outcomes. Then we have letters, communication tools that go to parents in English and Spanish at the beginning of a program or at the end of the program. Okay? So those are resources that are all online. So once you get there, then you start, you also have, and I recommend this, that you don't forsake your manual. Your manual is useful, particularly your manual is useful in preparing for a lesson. Okay, I like to think of it as kind of it's a little bit of homework. I'm going to read through. These are 4 pages out of the manual, the actual manual screenshots, dealing with getting along with others. And what I've highlighted here is that there's a tell component, and that you can see. I know you can't read easily on this. You can see that it's scripted. It says say these things, ask students this. So there's a tell component, a show component, a do and a practice component, a progress monitor, a generalize, and then there's a summary component. If you use your manual as preparation for an intervention lesson, and then you turn to the PowerPoints, you'll be able to kind of use the cryptic messaging on the PowerPoints in a very powerful way. So this PowerPoint introduces, this is the first slide that in lesson 1 that a student would see, and that you as the interventionist would see. It introduces through using pictures what is happening. These kids are getting along, it looks like to me. It defines what getting along means. And there's this kind of a vocabulary lesson check-in about some key words: together, share, nice, cooperate. So if you're thinking through this, you can see how using this with an entire class, the interventionist doesn't have to be in front of the class. They can sit with the students. You can be on the side. But it's designed to basically use a whiteboard or a white wall, if you will, and use this as a way to get kids to focus. The next slide is a critical slide. What are the skill steps for getting along? Step 1, think. Think about what you can do to get along with others. Step 2, talk. Talk nicely so others listen to you and know you want to be included. Step 3, do something nice to or with others to show you can get along. Step 4, smile. Show people that you are friendly and have positive feelings about them. Now, I know some of you are sitting there saying, yeah, I got a bully in my classroom. They're going to really like this. Well, they might not. They might not. But if you're doing it as a group, you've got all the kids in the classroom doing it. As you see, there's going to be momentum. And most bullies want to be part of a group. They just don't know how, okay? So they use inarticulate, awkward, and sometimes aggressive strategies to try to be part of the group, try to interact with other people. We're giving them alternative ways to do it. You may need to go through this a couple times with a bully to get it to stick. But what you're going to see is this is an engaging, interactive program that suggests that kids get opportunities, key concept, opportunities to practice a new behavior, or to practice a behavior that you feel pretty good about, but to practice it with different kids. So you're going to have the bullies doing role plays with other kids, okay, as you go through this. What I'm highlighting here is that you want people to write a little bit about these skill steps. That's what the student engagement form is. Okay. Then we're going to show. We're going to have some videos where kids are going to watch two kids interacting. In this example, there's a positive example of interaction, and then the lower videos, two kids actually failing to share. And ultimately, the boy bullies the girl about the use of these materials. And so you have a stimulus where you get kids to talk about these things, and they serve as a foundation then for moving to some guided role plays. These three situations here, you're going to have the difference between the do phase usually is the interventionist is part of the role play and interacts with kids to make sure that the desired behaviors are clearly modeled and talked about. Okay? Then we move to actually practice sessions where kids work together in small groups. They're reminded of the steps. They're given cue cards over here. There's actually 6 of them that come with every unit. So there's 6 for gets along with others. This is where I encourage those of you who have worked with kids before, be responsive to your students' needs. Create additional role plays. Use the same structure. Create role plays that are authentic, that are like the situations that bullying is happening in your classroom. And so by doing that, you can practice in a safe space how to respond to a bully, and actually how to get the attention of others using appropriate behaviors as opposed to bullying behaviors. Okay? So I really want to emphasize, although we have a structure, we provide you with lots of materials, you have the ability, in fact, we even give you a set of PowerPoint slides that are blank so you can create your own very authentic slides, but we encourage you to expand this SIP program and make it as authentic as possible, particularly around the role plays. Okay? So after a role play session, we ask every student to ask, how well do you think you're getting along with others in this case? We want you to rate your use of these desired behaviors. We use this very typical stepladder 4-level framework to suggest where you're at. And if you're following this, every unit has 3 lessons, so 3 times usually within 1 week, not always. Some people spill over to another week for a final lesson. We ask kids to reflect upon their behavior and how well they're exhibiting, in this case, the 4 steps that are part of good getting along with others. We ask them then to record it on their record form, keep track of it. Okay? The last element of a typical lesson, remember there were 6 phases. The last phase is generalized. And so we ask students, how can you get along with others who are much older than you, that speak another language than you, that wear very different clothes than you, that have different skin color than you? So you can modify this as well. As a teacher, interventionist, you could insert additional things about the application of the skill you've just spent 30 minutes working on and practicing in your classroom or in your intervention group. Okay? Generalization happens at the end of every one of the lessons. And in many ways, you can see how if you're listening to what kids are saying about generalization, you can use that information to create new role plays for your next lesson. So you can literally make them authentic to the situations kids are being confronted with. This is a generalization page, element of this page. It's very small. Use the back side of this page if you want to, because there's a lot to be done to get kids to think forward about additional situations that happen in the hall, on the playground, on the bus, at the shopping mall, etc. Okay. The second lesson, I'm just going to take a couple clips out of additional lessons here. The second lesson really focuses on emotion and asks kids to reflect upon their emotions and how what emotion they're experiencing and what emotion they think others experience. So we use our emotion cue cards. So lesson 2 is heavily oriented towards emotion in this unit on gets along with others. And again, we ask kids to record their emotions, how they feel, and how others feel. This is an important aspect because in bullying, there's a real notion to make people scared and to frighten people or to make them feel ashamed or sad. And so we really want to get bullies to understand what they're doing. We want to get victims to understand that and then to address those feelings and to change those feelings through their behavior. Okay? The last, I'm taking the clip out of lesson 3, again, trying to send the message that in order to be responsive to kids, we have to think about generalization situations above and beyond the group that they're in. Okay, so that takes us through one behavior and gets along with others. And as I illustrated today, I really think that there's a core 4 behaviors that need to be taught in order to reduce bullying and to prepare victims of bullying to deal with it in a more effective way. I'm going to pick up the pace here because this is kind of more of the same in terms of the routine. I want to highlight the routine. Again, the unit's going to be in a manual. You can prep yourself for it. Then you can go online. Stay calm with others as a unit. You can go online and get all of your materials that you need online to teach the unit. Okay? So lesson 1 starts, and many of our lessons start either with a picture like I showed the previous one or with a question. Why is it important to stay calm with other people? And now this screen I'm showing you actually is the full screen, but in your delivery of this, these are actually animated slides. So this just appears initially with the question mark and the little homunculi wondering. And then you ask kids to engage. And many kids will say things like, well, it helps solve a problem with others. It treats others the way you'd like to be treated. It shows you can control your temper. They may say other things as well, sometimes quite funny. But moving forward then, you're going to, just like always, you're going to define that skill. You're going to break it down into 4. Most of our skills are broken into 4 steps. Step 1 is feel if you are mad or upset. If you're dealing with a skill, staying calm with others, you've got to get in tune with your feelings. Think about what is making you mad or upset. Talk things over with the other person and do something to help you stay calm. Okay? Again, you can see the resources that support the skill. There are resources with videos illustrating inappropriate, negative behavior and positive behavior. And some of the videos get reused. These videos aren't necessary to be your students. They're really examples to get kids to think about, if I was that girl getting pushed, or if I was a student, a bystander here, what would I say? How could I respond to this kid who's kind of physically bullying this girl? Okay? So, again, there's guided role plays. The interventionist or the teacher's actively involved in this one. Then we move kids off on their own to do role plays, to practice. And those practices are supported with these cue cards that I showed you before, the role play situations. And again, I encourage you to think about, after you've used the role plays that Frank Gresham created, start creating some of your own, okay? That will make them more authentic. That will make them more applied to your situation. Okay? These are 2 examples, okay? A classmate calls you a name you don't like. Well, that's the beginning of teasing. That may be bullying. It may not. I don't know. You're going to have to understand the situation. But regardless, we're going to get kids to role play the situation out and take turns being the one who did the negative behavior, being the one that responds to the negative behavior, then switch the role play around. So if you're following through on this, you're going to see that about 10 or 12 minutes of every lesson, kids are actively engaged in using a skill and role-playing that skill in different situations. And that creates opportunities for feedback. If you're an effective teacher, if you're an effective interventionist, once this lesson is over and you turn to teaching reading, social studies, or math, you've also got these great opportunities to prompt kids. Remember, kids, use this skill that we worked on today, okay? It takes less than 10 seconds to begin to create multiple opportunities outside of the intervention unit, okay? That's where there's a dividend. That's where you get this return on this intervention investment that you've made, that you get kids to practices. I hope you leave the cue cards up that list the skills. Stay calm with others. That list the skill steps. I hope you leave up the emotions chart so that you can very efficiently get a few kids to respond and attend to that. And you can prompt them to think positively about this. So as I move forward here, this is monitoring progress phase. This should be, now you start to see the routine. Every lesson, every unit has some very similar structures. This allows kids to understand where you're at in a lesson, and it becomes rather automatic, and they can focus on their feelings. They can focus on the behaviors. Okay? So this is a generalization slide. Shows some different situations. The previous generalization slide was written statements. This happens to use visuals. Okay? Stay calm with others. This is lesson 2 of that same unit. It starts out, as opposed to with a question mark, it starts out with some visuals to connect with. And it reminds kids what we mean by this. If you feel you are becoming upset with others, you should think about how you feel, talk to the other person, and try to do something to solve the problem. This probably is more appropriate for a victim of a bully. But we want bullies to also to feel like what a victim is like and how he or she would respond if they were victimized. There's good data to show that a lot of people who are bullies actually are victims of previous bullying events, that they're using bullying as a response with a younger group or a different group of kids because they don't have the skills in their repertoire to effectively engage kids in a desirable way. Now, pushing forward, lesson 2, here we go. We start. Lesson 2 always has a lot more about how you feel. So that's what I'm trying to point out here is that you can't teach everything in each lesson if you constrain yourself to 30 minutes. We really want to get the fundamental behaviors down and situations down in lesson 1. Lesson 2 is a lot about your emotions and how you feel and how others feel. Okay? And then lesson 3, as we move forward, is about generalization, applying what you've learned to new situations. Okay? So, again, each of these lessons, I don't want to confuse you, each lesson has tell, show, do, practice, progress monitor, and generalized phases. I've taken sample slides out of our units to do that. Okay. So, again, highlighting each one of these PowerPoints has a lot of support materials. The effectiveness research done on this, largely by Jim DePerna and others, have used these support materials effectively, but in some cases they haven't been used, and just the manual-based treatment has been shown to be quite effective. Okay? So here's the third skill. So we've taught 2, get along with others, stay calm with others. The third skill I would recommend teaching is do the right thing. This is a responsible decision-making skill. And monitoring my time, I'm going to pretty much go through this one quickly. It just shows you that the resources are online. Everything is at your fingertips. You got the manual as your starting point. You're going to have a slide that engages kids to think about situations. Some of these visuals are positive, some are negative. You're going to move into getting them to think about why is it important to do the right thing. Then most importantly, you're going to say, this is what we mean by do the right thing. Think about what the right thing is, ask a question, decide what to do something that shows you know what the right thing is. Okay? And if we just stop there, all we've done is talk to kids. You've got to move into then the actual doing, the actual using of it. And we privilege role-playing to do that. So here's a situation that we ask the interventionist or teacher to be involved with the students to role-play. It models, if you will, then for the practice session. The practice session is where everyone in the group gets to take turns in role-play situations using the role-play cue cards that we talked about. And then we progress monitor. And this isn't just, kids writing down, I'm a level 3 or I'm a level 2. Yes, they do that, but it's getting teachers or interventionists to say, tell me about it. What do you need to work on? If you're level 3, there must be something more you need to work on. Or level 4, that means you've got all the behaviors in your repertoire. And if you really don't think they do, ask them to show you the behaviors. Progress monitoring, self-reflecting, is an opportunity then for feedback from an interventionist. And then once again, generalize. No surprises. Okay? So the fourth skill, do nice things for others. So basically what I've traversed right now is 3 units. If you were doing this by the book, you would be in the fourth week. Each of those other example skills was taught 1 per week. Again, it's not magical. That's what we recommend 3 times a day. You would have invested about 90 minutes into each skill unit. So you're 270 minutes into an intervention. By the way, folks, if you do the math on this, you're going to find if you teach all 10 skills in the SEL curriculum, if you taught all 10 skills, it would take about 1.5% of the school year. There's 72,000 minutes in the school year. Okay, so we're very interested in keeping this efficient, very interested in keeping it structured, and continuing the structure. All of you can fill in the blanks now. You know you'd have a manual. Your manual would lead you to the website. The website would give you the resources that you need to teach a lesson. This lesson, do nice things for others. It starts pretty typical with an engaging slide. What's happening here? What could you do that would be nice or helpful? It's kind of the replacement behavior of what can you do to be a bully, okay? And conversely, what would you do to be helpful? And so we define it. We do the skill step definitions, the 4 steps like we typically do, defined in the situation. We have videos that we would show, a positive video. In this case, it happens to be 2 positive videos. We don't show doing a negative thing to somebody. I've been told some people create their own videos. In fact, out of the role plays they do, they get video. So you can see how you can take on this curriculum, can grow, can be customized to fit your environment, and in effect be responsive to your needs and your students' needs. Okay? We do the do phase, which is this guided role play. Then we do the full role play in the practice sessions where kids are on their own. Interventionists, teachers walking around, watching, encouraging kids. You're going to focus on some of the kids that have more bullying behaviors probably, and see how they're behaving. Great opportunity to reinforce desired behaviors. Okay? I'm going to ask kids to monitor progress. And then, of course, we're going to think about generalization. How are you going to apply do nice things for others outside the classroom, in the hall, on the bus, at home? Okay. Well, I apologize if it's been too rapid, but I wanted to give you a sampling of the nature of the actual skill units and the structure that's provided along the way. I'm monitoring my time, so I don't think I have the luxury of a question right now. I've got a couple other things I'd like to say to you, and if time remains at the end, Chris, I'll take a question. So what are the tips? What are the summary points that I want to leave you with today? First off, I want you to back up, and as you looked at those 4 units repeated, I hope you conclude, yeah, they're sequenced, they're active, they're focused, they're explicit. These are elements that Castle and other researchers have argued are fundamental to a high-quality SEL intervention program. I want to add that they're also responsive. I've tried to make that clear, particularly encourage you to think about adding to role plays and making them authentic to your environment. So if you take that R, you end up saying that the SIF is a safer program, S-A-F-E-R. This is just another pitch here that this is a typical role play card. You've seen little snippets of these in these units that I've presented today. But this is the full card that you get when you download it from the website. And it illustrates that there are 6 role plays. Kids get the choice to pick those. Or you could, as an interventionist, say today, I want you to work on 8-1 and 8-2. But the big point of showing you this is I think you can create your own. If you do, you can expand this curriculum. And it really facilitates a lot more guided practice so that they generalize to the authentic situations that are local, that are in your school, okay? So don't be fooled here that this is a very short curriculum. Let me just give you a point to ponder. If you taught 10 skills, like in a core intervention program, and you had kids work on 6 role play sessions, you're actually teaching kids 60, 10 skills, 6 role plays, multiply those, that equals 60 applications of a skill. That's really what you're teaching. You're really teaching 60 skill situations. And if you're willing to expand this to your high-frequency bullying situations, you could, in short order, be teaching 80 or 90 skills. So it's actually very powerful. You also may have noticed there's no grade level attached to these. It's the role-play situations you choose. It's the role-play situations you create that create the developmental complexity and situation you need. Okay? The other thing that I've highlighted, I've tried to prompt this, that outside of the lesson, ideally you want a teacher to be aware, if they're not the one providing the instruction, you want them to be aware of the instructional skills and to create opportunities in his or her classroom for kids to practice this. You want teachers to prompt the use of the skill, and you want to stimulate kids to think about, how can I apply do nice things for others today? If you do that, you take this curriculum that takes about 900 minutes and you effectively magnify that impact. That's how you utilize a prevention approach to bullying in a very, very quick way up the impact potential. So I'm just about out of time. I very much appreciated your attention if you stayed with me today. I hope one of the takeaways from this is that you go, hey, this is pretty simple. I think I can do this, okay? Because that's what we tried to do. We tried to simplify intervention for you. We tried to simplify it by having by having assessments that deal with the target behaviors that you actually teach. In other words, the assessments aligned to the intervention. We tried to simplify this by having this very predictable structure: tell, show, do, practice, monitor progress, and generalize, that not only the interventionist learns very quickly and remembers, but the students learn. And so students don't have to wonder, what are we doing next? Where are we going? They can focus on the skills that you're trying to teach. And I hope you've seen that this could be used at different levels in a multi-tiered support system that might be in place in your school. It could be used universally as in a classroom delivered by teachers. It could be used as a tier 2, kind of as a small group pull-out for kids who've been identified as having bullying behaviors of high frequency, as well as others. I'm cautioning you, do not have a group of just bullying kids, okay? That's not smart. That's not easy, okay? So the bottom line for us is we're about effective intervention here with the SSIS, and we want it to be safer, and we want it to be simplified. And if you follow that and you have more interest, here's all the literature with the exact references to the material that I've referenced today as I've talked through this. Although I didn't specifically reference the 3 DiPerna articles, they're all published in high-quality journals: School Psych Quarterly, Journal of Ed Psych, Educational Psychology, documenting the effectiveness or the efficacy of the core program that I talked about. I don't want to confuse you. It doesn't document just for bullying students. It documents it for all students. Okay? So with that, I want to remind some of you who've been here before with me, but also indicate to others who've only joined for this session, there are 11 other webinars that I've done on assessment aspects and intervention aspects of the SSIS SEL. They're all at the website that Pearson has. This is the website. I encourage you to go back. They're voiceovers so that you can listen and share with other people. And I regret that there hasn't been as much time as I'd like for your questions, but as always, I encourage you to stay in touch with me, and if you want to sit down and write a question, please write to me at Arizona State University. And in doing so, note that Elliot has 2 T's in it, because if you only put 1 T in it, it goes to a guy in biology, and he's getting pretty angry with me. So He may be bullying me pretty soon if we don't get these email all tidied up. But anyway, I wish you well. Have a great year. It is Bullying Awareness Month. I hope this session has contributed to your awareness in some new way, and I hope that it energizes you to continue the good, important work that you're doing with kids every day to develop children who are really well balanced social, emotionally. So you take good care. Bye now.